What's up, folks? So we're back for this week's review for Dark Side of the Ring, and this week I think maybe my favorite episode of the entire season, and that's just because I think as a complete body of work, this episode was just absolutely amazing. It had the entertainment, it had the theatrics, it had a lot of the history. And I just thought it was paced good. I mean, hell, when it was over, I was like, wow, that the hour went by already. I was an absolute charm, and being a big fan of the subject of this episode, I was just thoroughly entertained, and just so much knowledge was in it. So like, I'm really kind of devastated about some of the things that kind of happened here. But we're definitely talking about the last ride of the Road Warriors, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. And this episode was really about the inside story of how World's Ultimate Tag Team Partnership is undone when one half of the powerhouse duo slides into alcohol and substance abuse. So, the big thing for me is just like, when you're talking about this tag team of Animal and Hawk, first of all, Animal just did a really phenomenal job of speaking about this entire experience. It's as dear and close as it was to him. He stayed on track. It was well paced. He didn't really show any emotion, as emotional as it could have been for him. And he really delivered the facts of everything that happened. And I thought that was like really, really important. First of all, too, the WWF, WWE, we'll just, whatever you want to call it, but obviously WWF at the time is one of my favorite themes of all time. No, I'm not going to say it, but yes, it's one of my favorite themes of all time. And the tag team belts that they had in that period are literally the best tag team belts of all time. So they're quickly highlighted and showed in the beginning of it, and I just got googly eyed because those are literally one of the best championship belts of just all time. They're literally the GOATs. But the other big thing is having Paul Ellering, who was their manager and really one of the masterminds, because you kind of hear the story about how they all got together and how it all worked. It was truly a treat. I really loved the details of that. But Paul Ellering, having him on this episode was absolutely very special and such a treat. And much like he said on this episode, and I definitely echo it, when you talk about the Road Warriors, they were often imitated, never duplicated. And it's funny they highlight the Ascension, which was so funny to me. But yeah, it's really cool to really get to know about the origins and how they got their first start of becoming a tag team down in Georgia Championship Wrestling. And then beyond them being friends in Minneapolis, Minnesota, like the abundance of talent in that immediate area, I really had no clue. I knew a few names were from that area, but I really had no clue of just how many really successful wrestlers came out of that small area. So that was like a gold mine back in the day for just, getting wrestler. And the fact of, they, didn't really have aspirations in becoming pro wrestling. It was just like, hey, you go around there 9 times out of 10, you're going to find somebody you can make one or just has the natural born talent to become one. So that was really cool to hear that as well, too. But again, to Paul Ellering, hearing the brilliance of how he pretty much crafted, how they were going to be really functional as a tag team, the spots, the storytelling, and then, once he started, blueprinting, as they say, we're right on a napkin, but once he started blueprinting the ideas and so forth, that's when everybody gears started turning about the look, about the name, the entrance gear, the face paint, everything. It's all of it came together. The Doomsday Device is still one of my favorite finishers of all time, and it's probably the most iconic finisher of all time. And the reason I say that is because no one does it. Everybody's finisher has been reused at some point, but that finisher has almost been untouchable. No one does it at all. To this day, others have done it, back in that era at points, but like at this moment now in wrestling, no one does it. And I think that just speaks about really the prestige of that, and pretty much how much respect they commanded as a tag team. But even if you had no clue how much they to respect them as a tag team, these guys, we're talking about tag team wrestlers now, they drew main event crowds everywhere. And that's a big thing because most people, mid cars, if most, but they drew main event crowds, monumental numbers. They even said that when they went to Japan at the airport, they drew more of a crowd than Michael Jackson did. I do not even know how that is. Like, I had no clue. I would never have guessed. I don't even think I can even repeat that without believing it ain't true. But they said it was true. That's what type of numbers they was in. Hey, not to even mention too, like they even had their own, when they got their loud pop, they even had a name for that as well. So, these guys were the real deal. But like I said, they had their own name for their pop, the Road Warrior pop. It is so funny that Paul Ellering actually said that the reason he lost his hearing is because of the loud cheers that the Road Warrior pop gave him. And if that's true or not, that's absolutely funny. But yeah, these guys draw, and like it's truth to it. I've seen them. I definitely seen them in person as a child. Obviously, I'm not able to really engage into the level of loudness there. But when they came out, people went crazy. There's no doubt about it. I actually read really quickly before I did this review. Somebody said like, hey, they seen them in their local town. They said it was by far the loudest pop that they've ever heard for a loud experience at the time. So I believe it. I mean, these guys, again, as a tag team function, was drawing main event crowd. They was drawing 80,000. WrestleMania, SummerSlam, which we'll talk about in a second. 80,000 people capacity for this event, and they were like, within the main event picture. So like, it's a lot to do with like how popular they were. But as all things with Dark Side of the Ring, it always takes a turn for the worse, and this one is circled around Hulk. Mike, that goes by Hulk in the tag team. He was in Japan. He partied hard. He even associated himself with the Japanese mafia. Yeah, and a lot of that came with drinking and taking a lot of painkillers. But nonetheless, even under this influence, they still had some really brutal matches. I was thinking back as they talked about on this episode, the Russian chain matches. I forgot all about those. Absolutely brutal. But they were known for putting on all types of crazy matches, and they showed up and they gave it their 110%. But you have to imagine you putting on these high caliber matches in the spotlight, in the main event, and with one of your, as a tag team, you got to be coherent. And not only just coherent, but you gotta be cohesive together. And the fact of like, one person's off, then it throws everything off, and that does go into their time when they go to WWF, and they had to be rebranded as the Legion of Doom. Being the Legion of Doom because the Ultimate Warrior was already in WWF. Vince wanted to change the name. Vince doing what Vince does this, and they ended up coming with a new name. But when they came out in SummerSlam 1992, it was really pitiful because Hulk was just so out of it. It was a terrible match, and Animal was just livid. First of all, the entrance with the motorcycles was one of the most memorable entrances of all time. But like in the ring, he was just, you could tell he was out of it. He was absolutely out of it. Vaguely remember it. Actually, WWE actually posted that on their network, a clip of it as a network feature on their Twitter today, so you can check that out, or on their YouTube. But the two things about this story I want to talk about really quick is that, number one, when they talked about them getting their haircuts, and they talked about how you get one mohawk and he gets two mohawks and they put together to make one unit, I thought that was absolutely funny. I never knew that's why they cut their hair that way, but it worked. But the funniest of all funny this entire episode, and I don't know why we needed to know this, but thank you, Godfather. You are the GOAT for this. But when they talked about Vince McMahon being in the strip club, and Vince McMahon was in the strip club, and he took everyone's finisher, he took the Doomsday device in the strip club, I will pay top dollar to see that actual footage if it exists. Could you imagine Vince McMahon saying, yeah, everybody give me your finisher? Got to be absolutely hilarious. Again, I have no clue why that information was necessary. They brought the Godfather in for one thing, and that was it, and they was out. I have no clue why that even made sense to be this, but it is what it is. But obviously, because Hawk was, doing his drugs and stuff while he was inside the club. But obviously, to take the Doomsday Vice, you need the Legion of Doom to do so. But it's kind of sad because Animal really gave Hawk so many chances, and he just finally threw in the towel on Hawk because he was a liability to both of their professional careers, and you just had to do what's best to send them separate ways. But when people break up, things get ugly because Hawk went to Japan and used the same tag team, got a new partner. That's got to be silly because Animal went on a solo run to keep the integrity of the tag team because he would never do that to his partner. So, and he didn't even seem ill will about it. He was just that's messed up. It didn't seem bitter or anything, but he was that's messed up. Animal showed a lot of pride in this episode, 100%. But when they did their second run in WWE, I just absolutely hated it, and it was just absolutely a pleasure to hear them say how much they hated it too, because God, was it just bringing in draws who I thought was cool for the time, but that was unnecessary to put a third person in that tag team. But it was a liability policy for or insurance policy for the WWE, and it is what it is. But it was just horrific. It was just terrible. But when they talk about Hawk's near-death experiences, it's just kind of yee. That stuff was kind of crazy. Said he did an accident, did 10 flips, and just walked away from it. There's some, well, but towards the end of this episode, Hawk ended up getting his life together. He found religion. He married his longtime girlfriend. He got straight, and he just took his life for the better path. And they eventually. Like I said, got clean and eventually was wrestling and everything was all good. But before one event, they said that he was at home and they called and said he passed away anymore and said his heart just gave out. And you could imagine with just the years of abuse and substance abuse and just all the professional wrestling and so on, his heart just tapped out, and that was just enough for it. So. Bittersweet ending, but everyone spoke so good about him, and hearing about the funeral, how that kind of went about was really touching and so on. But again, it's just one of my favorite episodes. It's just really well done. So much information, good testimonies, and just everyone involved. From Hawk's brothers talking, and all the people that he was on the road with, people that gave him a start and everything. It was just a really well done episode. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. But man, I gotta tell you, I do not know if I'm ready for next week because the finale is next week, and it is the story of Owen Hart, and I do not know how that's gonna go because they saying it's gonna be some unseen footage, and I can only imagine what that could be. But until next week, guys, stay tuned and let's sit tight because it's gonna be a wild one next week, y'all.